Your Excellency, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, distinguished guests, my dear friends, friends from way, way back, friends through all the phases I've been through in life. Thank you for being here to share this special occasion, made more special by the presence of the President. Wide open, he said, relative to what Senator Cayetano said about I never dodged what I wanted to do, which got me into the CKD problem, the chronic kidney disease problem. After my transplant, there was a party that was hosted by a fellow traveler, Mrs. Heling Batumbakal. And Dr. Ramos, being our common doctor, he saw me munching on the crispy lechon, the balat ng lechon. His eyes went wide open. He said, "Billy, are you still eating that?" And I quickly replied, "Oh yes, doc. If your doctor is good, you can." He was not about to say he's not a good doctor. So up to this day, I still keep eating the balat of the lechon. My problem is not an easy problem. Many people you will hear will complain about the cost, and that's true. When I underwent the stage of hemodialysis at the Makati Medical Center, Rose, that's a plug, I'll charge you. At that time, and I'm sure it has increased since then, I was calculating that our cost for the 2 years I underwent hemodialysis is something like buying a new car every year, the grade of an Altis. So right there and then you realize that this disease can only be afforded by people who belong to the class A, B, upper C socioeconomic strata. And that's true because according to global data, about $1 trillion are now spent globally to treat the disease of chronic kidney, also known as end-stage renal failure. Now, even if many countries are sharing that, that is a big strain even on the budget, the health budget of a developed country. There are easily 100 million people in the world who are affected by chronic kidney disease. And in the Philippines, it's now known to be the 10th leading cause of Filipino mortality. 10,000 enter the stage every year, and they need to undergo dialysis. I was very fortunate that I had a very good friend. Her name is Trinidad Tabi Fernandez. Now, by the name Tabi, you know exactly that she is of the foodie variety, just like me. She's a good friend of Maria Montelibano, and Tabi and I would even go to places in the world just to eat and fulfill our passion for food. One time and during the last state visit of President Cory, this was the ministers' meeting in Singapore, Teddy Benigno couldn't believe what we were doing. We went to this very nice seaside Chinese restaurant in Singapore. And when the waiter was asking us, "How would you like your oyster? Natural or sizzling?" And we would reply, "Both." And there were about 2 other dishes, and our reply would be both. So Teddy was saying, "I cannot believe my ears." And then when he saw us eating, he said, "Now I cannot believe my eyes." Tabi and I got our just desserts. But lucky for me, Tabi entered the stage of chronic kidney disease about a year ahead of me. So she became some sort of a guide because she is a communicator. That's why she was working with Maria Montelibano at RTVM during the time of President Cory. And we would email each other. At that time, she was already living with her sisters in New York. And she would explain to me what she's undergoing because she knows in due time I will be having to undergo hemodialysis because my creatinine already broke through the 2.0 barrier. and that's constantly just going up. And you wait for it to hit about 5 or 6, and then you have to go for hemodialysis. So I had this insight from somebody who knew how to write and who studied her problem. And so I was ahead of what I was going to be experiencing. And by God, it was very helpful for me. So later on, what happened was that a lot of friends, they were sending me emails asking, how are you? They realized that end-stage renal failure or chronic kidney disease is a terminal disease. It's just a matter of time when you will go. I think a lot of my friends could not wait until I went. So I was bombarded every day about how are you, what did you have today, and so forth and so on. So I realized after a time that I was making some sort of a diary, and since it was an outlet for sharing, I did what Tabi was doing. And they enjoyed it. They gave me feedback. I never realized a disease could be so entertaining. So I accumulated a lot of it. And later on, when some doctors found out, they said, we think you should write a book because you have the gift of having gone through it. You are a ringside seat to somebody with the disease, a first-hand experience. And you have the gift for writing. And so it took me a little time, but I got onto it, and finally, with the help of Dr. Ramos, who corrected the medical terms, I had to ask him to do it because I might kill somebody if I put in something and he followed and it was wrong. This is a deadly disease. And that's how it came about that we got to writing this book. So just as I was gifted by having a friend like Tabi, I now hope to be a light to the others in the world who are suffering the same thing. Well, in so doing, I'm hoping that every person I help gets to remove a demerit I have up there and add up to the merit. When you're a senior, you have to think about these things already. Chronic kidney disease is not an easy problem because it affects not just the organ, but your brains and many other things. I tell you, there are periods when I felt like I would prefer to pray to go than to stay. When you're having hemodialysis, you feel like you've lost 3 days of your life, the day when you have to go for hemodialysis. I wake up in the morning, my wife packs my picnic lunch because the beautiful thing about dialysis, you can eat all you want in the first 2 hours. So everything that was bawal, oh no, not in the first 2 hours, I can eat it. I was the only one who ate caviar at the kidney unit, but since I didn't have champagne, I just had beer with it. And the other patients at the kidney unit thought that we're not supposed to eat until they saw me. So they were asking them, what's that beast doing over there? So before they knew it, everybody was also eating. Now, it's not also advisable because if you are suffering from hypotension, it could aggravate. Hypotension is when your blood level, your blood pressure goes down, and that's a killer. Many people with renal disease die from hypotension. And then one of the worst things that could ever hit you while having dialysis is the infernal cramps. I tell you, I'd go through all the roster of the saints in 5 seconds because of the pain, the stabbing pain. It would start from a pinky toe and go all the way to your stomach. And there is nothing like it. Nothing like it. So, one amazing thing that happened is, my need for a donor was announced all over media. Even in the PBA games, Ronnie Nathaniels, in between timeouts, was saying, hey, if you have a kidney, you want to give it to Billy? And Teddy Benigno wrote about it. Monsignor Nico Bautista had a column then, wrote about it. Didi, I think you wrote about it. But I was amazed. The biggest response I got was from Joanne. When Joanne wrote about it, I was flooded with inquiries. There were responses from the others, but not at the level you generated. So thank you there, Joanne. Eventually, probably as God willed, to get my donor, it took people I knew, friendships that I cultivated early in life. From my good friend Tony Uzon, unfortunately, he won't be back till September, and his cousin here, Gani Kabuai. My problem was, I cannot just take an ordinary donor. If I had a person the size of Dr. Ramos donate his kidney to me, I'll be lucky to keep it for 5 years because his kidney is not used to the pound per square inch within my system. Yeah, it's like a UAAP player that you throw him in the finals of the NBA. Can you imagine what he's going to do there? He'll be overwhelmed. So we had to look for at least a 190-pounder who was healthy. And usually people that heavy have diabetes or hypertension and are not qualified. But Gani and Tony had nothing to do one day, went to the cockpit, which they don't normally do, and lo and behold, a Cristo, who is a seaman who didn't have a trip, walked in front of them, and they looked at each other and said, "Oh my God, this is a donor." The best one who described him when I had my transplant was Boy Saicon. He went to the hospital, but you know, when I'm newly transplanted, you cannot enter. He went there and he was talking to me on the door and he said, "I'll greet your donor, I want to meet him." And then he came back and then he said, "Where did you get that gladiator?" That's how big he was. It was a very healthy donor. That was really a gift. There's a funny incident that happened when I was transplanted. Guess who visited me? Gloria. And the conspirator there was that guy, Saicon. If she brought Mike Arroyo with him, I might have rejected right there and then. Now, the funny thing that happened is, after a while, you lose your ability to move urine. So after a transplant, your bladder is starting to adjust. And you were moving urine every 30-20 minutes. And it's really a big sensation. Now here was GMA. We were having a nice conversation, but she was already into the 40th minute. And I thought my kidney was about to explode. So I said, "Glo, I really appreciate your coming here, but it's either you want to stick around and see what I'm going to do, or go back and do your work." She took the cue and left. I cannot forget the time when I returned home from the transplant and I wrote my first email, and you read it in the book. And my first line was, 2 years ago when I got hit with the disease, I was looking at terminals. I mean, I'm a very realistic person. I knew that my disease was terminal. I stopped all my businesses. I started packaging my estate so that my wife won't have a difficult time running away with my loot. And somehow, my first line was, 2 years ago, I was looking at terminals. Now, I am looking at horizons. Well, one of the groups that has kept me alive, they're well represented here, the members of the Focolare movement. Father Shinti, Ray Asper, leaders of the Focolare, they're here. And every time I was in crisis, I would text them, and they would bombard heaven. And I don't know what they have there. They've got a pipeline somewhere. It always worked. It always worked. Ray Asper gave me the inspiration for the closing line of my book. I remember when I was having that almost fatal kidney rejection last June of 2011. Ray was in the hospital and he observed so many people coming to see me, and then he sent me an SMS message later on, and he said, you, Billy, in good health, pushed a lot of people to join many of the things you advocated. Now in sickness, you pushed a lot of people to love. Thank you, Ray, for that closing line. Again, thank you to all of you. This is a special day for me, and you're all special.